What are some images? Abraham is clearly a picture of what it means to believe, right? Abraham is a paragon of faith in the Old Testament, and Abraham is just as important, if not more important, in the New Testament. Abraham exemplifies faith according to James. He acted on God's promises. That's what faith looks like. Abraham exemplifies faith according to Paul. He trusted God, and he was justified because he put his trust in God. And all this happened before Moses, before the Torah, before Israel. So salvation isn't just a Jewish thing. Jesus isn't just a Jewish Messiah. He's the world's Messiah. The gospel is the power of salvation to all who believe, first the Jew, but also the Gentile. That's why Paul wants to go to Abraham. Abraham is pre-Jewish faith. The Psalmist exemplifies faith. How is it that Christians can just pick up the Psalter and read the Psalms and pray the Psalms and sing the Psalms in Christian worship? It's because they're fulfilled in Jesus Christ, right? The psalmist exemplifies faith. And as I've already said, the psalmist doesn't take blind leaps. When the Psalms are expressing doubt or despair, what the classic pattern? What's the classic pattern? Where are you? My whole life is a shambles. Have you forgotten me? Do you hate me? Etc. is where they start. But then they remember. Then they start going, but you delivered people out of Egypt. You delivered my ancestors. You came through on the promises to the patriarchs. I'm going to hold on. I'm going to keep my trust in you. I know you'll deliver me. Job exemplifies faith. In suffering. I'm going to call it later on disciplined faith. The cloud of witnesses in the book of Hebrews exemplifies faith. Again, when the writer to the Hebrews wants us to get a picture of what belief looks like, actually, almost all the material is Old Testament material. Therefore, since we're surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross. It is for discipline that you have to endure. God is treating you as sons, as heirs. All right? For what son is there whom the Father doesn't discipline? So, we looked at Abraham, who's disciplined, not just by this call to sacrifice Isaac, but Abraham has a hard walk to walk. The psalmist is going through a lot of difficulties. Job is in a class by himself up until Jesus. The cloud of witnesses are facing this kind of discipline. And then a New Testament example right from where we've been reading is Paul. Paul sets himself to his churches as an exemplar of what it means to have faith. The antithesis of faith is doubt, right? And now, who exemplifies doubt in the Scriptures? Thomas does. Judas Iscariot does. Great. Thomas exemplifies, I'm going to say, skepticism. It's interesting. Thomas already heard the testimony of enough witnesses that he should have gone along. It's not that Thomas doesn't have enough proof. Thomas's problem wasn't that there wasn't enough evidence. Thomas's problem was, for whatever reasons, that he couldn't accept the testimonies of trustworthy people that God was trustworthy. Trustworthy enough to raise Jesus from the dead. Judas Iscariot, I think, is a deeper exemplar of doubt. In all four Gospels, doubting Thomas only shows up in John chapter 20. Judas shows up in all four Gospels. And his doubt isn't, I don't believe that God exists. Again, look at how closely the New Testament pictures of faith resemble the Old Testament pictures of faith, and how much further away they are from our mental images of what faith looks like. Paul is drawing on a really different well of meaning than the ones that we draw on. And this is why I wanted to teach this series, because the word doesn't mean what we think it means. Let's wrap up faith and let's wrap up the series. I want to take you to 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 4. He's granted us his precious and very great promises, that through these you may escape from the corruption that is in the world because of passion, evil desire. Now, Judas Iscariot exemplifies the corruption caused by evil desire. However much he deserves it, he exemplifies it. For this very reason, make every effort to, I'm going to say, provide for your faith with virtue, and virtue with knowledge, and knowledge with self-control, and self-control with steadfastness, and steadfastness with godliness, and godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. He ends up where Paul ends up. Faith has needs. Trust has needs. We provide for it by these resources, by these further virtues. All right? And if we do that, love being the capstone, we can escape the corruption of evil desire and attain the promises that God has given us in Jesus Christ. That's 2 Peter chapter 1. So summing up the whole 3 weeks, what does Paul think faith, hope, and love mean? He's treating these as, I think, virtues that order the Christian life. In fact, they order the very Christian life that produces those virtues. Right? And they order the eternal future that requires them. When you look at what it means to be judged for our works in the New Testament, and we are judged by our works in the New Testament, it really is whether we are worthy, suitable for the service of the kingdom that we're appointed to. And it's virtues like these that are integral to the life that we're going to be appointed to, that we therefore need to develop. Faith is disciplined faith. Faith is trust in a trustworthy God that's been tested and strengthened through thick and thin. Right? It's grounded in knowledge, but it's strong even in uncertainty. The way a trusting relationship is strong in uncertainty, because it's grounded in firm knowledge. Hope is hope through suffering, hope that's raised and grown and tempered and made strong through suffering. All right? Suffering that occasions prophecies, that are reasons for God to give us words of hope, but it outlasts those prophecies. I'm circling back to 1 Corinthians 13. And love is sacrificial love. All right? Fueling worship and glory and tongues, but far surpassing them. All of these are other-directed, they're God-directed, they're neighbor-directed. They're not self-directed or self-generated. In Paul's language, which we might as well close with in 1 Corinthians 13, I'll just read the section about this starting in verse 8. Love never fails. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. He's using knowledge, prophecies, and tongues as good, but passing away, temporary, elementary. All right? The things that are advanced, the things that last are faith and hope and love. And knowledge is connected with faith, but knowledge is really preliminary and elementary. Faith depends on it, but it surpasses it. Prophecies are elementary. They give rise to hope, but the hope actually exceeds the promise, right? The hope outlasts the prophecy. And tongues are an expression of love and devotion. The tongues of angels. But concrete love of one another and of God above all is way more significant than tongues. That's what he's doing here. He's not denigrating those other things. He's just saying they're elementary. So faith, hope, and love remain, these three, but the greatest of these is love. And then really, I think that the bridge to chapter 14 is also the tag of chapter 13. Seek this love, right? And go for the things of the Spirit. That's my translation. Make love your aim and earnestly desire spiritual gifts. That's a typical rendering. But I'm going to stick with mine. All right? Seek this love and go for the things of the Spirit.